Hello, and welcome to this Medito live session. So I'm Stephen, I'm one of the co-founders of Medito, and I'm joined here today by Professor Jennifer Daubenmier. Jennifer is a member of Medito Foundation's Scientific Advisory Board, and she's an associate professor in the Holistic Health Studies program at San Francisco State University. For the past 15 years, she's been studying the impact of Eastern mind-body healing practices, including meditation and yoga, and those effects on well-being and health among people with obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and prostate cancer. Her work has been funded by the National Institute of Health, and she has published 45 reviewed research articles. She's been practicing meditation on the Buddhist path for 25 years under the guidance of teachers from the US, Nepal, Tibet, and she studied Tibetan Buddhist perspectives in India as a US Fulbright Scholar. And she currently teaches courses on meditation. So today, Jennifer is going to lead us through a 5-minute guided meditation. Then she'll be talking about common meditation myths and giving us some tips on how we can improve our meditation practice. Then after that, we'll do a brief Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the comments. Great, so I'll hand over to you, Jennifer, and we can kick off with the guided meditation.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and to support the work that you are doing on behalf of Medito Foundation. The teachings were originally given, offered for free in the time of the Buddha, and so it's nice to see this tradition carried forward in the 21st century. So thank you for that. I thought we would start with a brief meditation just to allow ourselves to settle into this present moment together virtually, wherever you are in the present, around this home we call the earth. And if you're even listening in the future, I also invite you to come into a practice with us. We'll do a short guided meditation for about 5 minutes. And I'm also setting a timer here just to keep myself on track as well. So I invite you to take a seat wherever you are, however you feel comfortable. And if you feel like lying down, if that would be more supportive to you at this time, feel free to do that. And really listening to your body and mind. These are all suggestions, and you know what's best for you by listening. So I encourage you to really empower yourself to do what feels right and take this as an invitation to practice. So first, we can begin with the foundation of our practice, which is our body, and just feeling ourselves sitting on our seat. Perhaps our feet are touching the floor, making contact with the ground. Just coming into our embodied sense of being, feeling the weight of the body, allowing ourselves to feel supported by our chair or a cushion in the earth. Allowing the spine to be straight, the back of the neck to be long. And letting go of anything you might be holding in your hands. Allowing them to rest on your thighs. Your palms face down. And the eyes can be open or closed. And if they're open, a soft downward gaze. And just taking a breath here. Noticing the stability of your posture. And the simple dignity of sitting with intention. And as we sit, beginning to notice the gentle flow of the in-breath and out-breath. Or wherever you feel it in your body at this time. And perhaps the rise or fall of the abdomen. Or the rise and fall of the chest. Or the breath moving in and out through the nostrils. And giving yourself a sense of permission to be here practicing with your breath in your body. And letting go of the thoughts of the day and the to-do lists of the future. Feeling a sense of protection to give yourself the space. And letting go of a sense of effort or striving. Allowing yourself just to notice what's naturally happening. And the thoughts that might arise and pull us away from the breath. It's natural and normal. And when we notice that, it's a moment of awakening. And we can bring our attention back to the breath. And giving ourselves another moment. And perhaps thinking about your intention for today and how you'd like to care for yourself with your meditation practice. And as you're ready, slowly opening the eyes if they've been closed. Perhaps moving your wrists or your ankles. And bringing attention back into the room, the sights and the sounds, and the screen, the people before you. So thank you for your practice.
Great, thank you very much. That was really nice. Feel quite chilled out now.
Okay.
Great. So I guess we can move over to the talk part of the session. So I'll just add the presentation to the screen. There you go.
Okay.
And yeah, you can just let me know when you want me to skip ahead with the slides.
Okay, yeah. So thank you again for Medito for doing this fabulous work of making the practice of meditation freely available to all. That's so important and in the spirit of the ancient tradition. So thank you again for that. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. And we did the sitting meditation, so we can go ahead and move forward. So today we're talking about mindfulness meditation practice. This is a common practice that many of us have been exposed to and are learning about on, especially on Medito, a meditation app. And you may be familiar with some of the practice of mindfulness. And I wanted to talk a little bit and offer some guidance around some myths and stereotypes that can come up around the practice. And, often with meditation, we see images like this of a kind of a peaceful woman or person sitting in an upright posture in a very serene, place in nature. And so our lives are often very busy and hectic. And so this seems very appealing and alluring to us. And I know when I started meditation, there were no apps available. I learned from a book. And so it was kind of taboo when I learned 25 some years ago. And now it's so much more widely accessible and people are practicing. Yet at the same time, I'm noticing that there's these kind of common myths or stereotypes that can come up, especially in my students who take my class. They will have some experience meditating with apps, but they still carry with them a lot of expectations of what they think meditation should be like. And I think some of it might be due to images like this, that we have this sense of serenity. And yet we know the practice looks a lot easier than it actually is. And so with mindfulness, we are paying attention to what's actually going on in our bodies, in our minds, our thoughts, and our feelings. And these are often the objects of our attention. And so we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And so one of the first myths I think that is out there for whatever reason in our culture or elsewhere is that the goal of meditation is to not have any thoughts, to have this blank mind. That somehow we are just going to sit down and all the thoughts are just kind of going to get zapped and we're just going to be in this blissful, spacious, peaceful state. But if you've ever sat for a short amount of time, you might notice that that doesn't really happen. And there's a little cartoon here kind of displaying some of the kind of thoughts that just spontaneously bubble up. And so the first thing that we actually realize when we sit down to meditate is we see how busy our minds might be, how scattered, how chaotic, how it's hard to focus or concentrate, or we don't feel like it, or maybe we're really tired. And so in actuality, this is referred to as our monkey mind. This is a term that is affectionately given to the monkey who is thought to kind of jump around from tree to tree, seeing whatever it sees, being attracted to it and chasing after it, etc. And so we can kind of relate to this animal part of ourselves that is just attracted in pursuing comfort and kind of avoiding displeasure. Okay, so you can go ahead and go to the next slide. And so when we start realizing this monkey mind, we come upon the second meditation myth, I like to say, is that we think we are doing it wrong. We think we can't meditate. Has anyone thought that ever? I hear my students say that a lot. Or I hear people say, I tried it once, but I can't meditate. My mind is just too busy. That's probably one of the most common things I hear people say. And what's interesting to me is that actually I feel like that is a sign that you are meditating because you're noticing what's actually happening in your mind. You're noticing that it's really busy. And that's paying attention. That's waking up to your actual experience and seeing your mind directly. And that's what mindfulness is all about. We are, stepping away from how we habitually follow after each thought. And the thought leads to another thought, and we end up having this big thought castle in the sky of our minds, right? Or we end up judging ourselves, right? And why did I can't do this. Why, I'm too much, I'm just not good enough to do this. And we might get caught up in these judgments of ourselves, right? So, but we're beginning to notice this. And so that's actually a good sign. And it's actually a sign that we're practicing. It's good news. Even though it might not be news that we want to hear, it might not feel good, it might not be what we expect. But this is what the practice is about, is encountering what is. Okay. Next slide. So I wanted to say a couple words about the practice of mindfulness. There's a couple components to it. And the first one is a concentration practice where in this practice today, we're bringing our attention back to the breath. So our breath is the object of our attention. And it can be a different part of the body. It can be an object that you're observing, an image in your mind, etc. But commonly what happens is that when we set our intention to focus on a particular object, that we might keep on that object, for example, the breath, for a breath or two, and then we become distracted, right? And we might be lost in thought for a long time, a short time, or whatever. But when we realize it, that's a moment of waking up. And the instruction is to just bring our attention back to the breath, back to the object, again and again. Jack Kornfield says it's like training a puppy. We're very gentle, we're very kind, and very patient with ourselves. And this is not always easy to do because sometimes you might notice that it's hard to pull ourselves away from our thoughts, where there's so much momentum in them. It's so habitual for us that it does take some effort. It can take a lot of effort just to place our attention back on the breath for one breath. And that's a huge step. Just to do it one time for one breath, one moment, we are stepping out of our habitual reactivity to our life. And that is huge. And so it takes practice, and there's no need to judge ourselves thinking that we're doing it wrong or right. We're doing it just right. We're beginners. We're at stage 1. We all start there, and we all return back there again and again. Even after I've been practicing 25 years, still my mind gets really busy, and I come back to the breath again and again. And so gradually, slowly, the mind starts to learn, the neurons start to rewire themselves in new ways, where we can have a new baseline of rest that's less active in thinking and more still in being, in witnessing, in observing. And one of the traditional analogies is like a lake, where the ripples on the lake start to calm and the surface of the lake becomes clear. And so we're cultivating that stability and clarity. And then that lake becomes like a mirror. It becomes calm, and we can start to see what's reflected on it and what's underneath it. Okay. So the second aspect of mindfulness traditionally is clear seeing. It's insight. The Sanskrit term is vipassana. So we have concentration and then the clear seeing of whatever we're seeing, the clear knowing at the same time. So we're not just concentrating and kind of zoning out, blanking out. To the contrary, we're stilling our mind, and it's becoming more clear and vibrant. And whatever we're seeing has more granularity to it, more vividness, more of a felt experience, etc. So this clarity is really important. That's our microscope, our ability to start to examine this mind and body, this experience of life. So we start to gain insight into our experience. So once this lake is calm, right? Once the thoughts have are less chaotic, fewer and far between, we can start to see kind of what's down underneath that lake. If you've ever gone into a pond or a lake, you can start to see, if it's clear, kind of what's at the bottom, some old beer cans or old nails or whatever is there, right? There's stuff there. And so that's all of our like buried thoughts and feelings that we haven't had time to process or see are going to start to bubble up. And so again, this is normal. This is part of the process. One tip here for maintaining our attention of not getting overwhelmed when these pop up is a labeling practice. So this is something you can try, especially if you have a thought or feeling that's really persistent, is just labeling it. You might just label it thinking, lost in thought, worrying, dreading, falling asleep, hungry, whatever it is you're feeling. The moment you label it, you start to be less caught up in it and you start to be able to see it more directly. And that's a sign of freedom, beginning to have freedom from our thoughts, and we can label them. And we're labeling them, without trying to push them away. We're not labeling and say, now get away from me. We're just noticing them, right? And they're going to go in their own time. And so we let them be. We allow them to dissolve when the time comes. We can't really control that ourselves. And we begin to notice that thoughts will just come and go. They'll arise and they'll disappear on their own. And so we're witnessing to that and we're settling in. That's the importance of being grounded in our bodies on our cushion, to allow that activity to happen, yet we have a physical sense of resting. Okay, next one. So this isn't often a pleasant process. And so this runs up against the third meditation myth that I like to talk about, is that we often think meditation is supposed to feel good. Right? And if it's not feeling good, well, I must not be doing it right. Some meditation teachers will say, well, if you just want to feel good, then why not go get a massage or go to the spa, get a, do something else like that will promote some physiological relaxation. So meditation is not always going to feel good. It might sometimes, and that's our draw, right? That's what we want. But let's see, we will, the mind will be busy, right? And we're going to encounter these unpleasant experiences. And so this is inevitable. But yet when we do have those pleasant experiences, when our mind does calm down and we feel a little bit of bliss, it's really easy to get attached to that and think, oh, that felt good. I want more of that. And have expectations that the next time I practice, it should be just as good as last time or that one time when practice felt really good. And this is a trap we can fall into. So it's because we can start expecting it, and that expectation actually creates a sense of effort and striving. And so we're further away from the practice of allowing things to be. It's that allowing, it's the not expecting that creates the openness, relaxation, and the bliss. So not being attached and letting go to this expectation that meditation is supposed to feel good. Okay. Pema Chodron is one of my favorite authors, and there's a quote from here, and she often really talks about being present to the discomfort, that when the discomfort is arising, that this is our perfect teacher. And you can go ahead and list the bullet points. So we, we have this habit where we think that discomfort is bad. Ancient habit of we want to move away from discomfort and into a state of comfort, right? And if we are feeling discomfort, we think it's really bad news. And so she is saying that this actually is our invitation. It's to come closer to our experience and see how we are causing our suffering by holding on to our thoughts of wanting things to be a certain way, wishing things weren't a certain way, etc., that is really the cause of our suffering. So we're starting to see, getting into the machinery of how our mind works and what causes suffering. So that little sense of discomfort, that's our window into understanding the ultimate causes of our suffering in our mind. And seeing our patterns, how we relate to discomfort, what do we do? Do we get mad at ourselves? Do we blame others? Do we just try to shut down and escape? Whatever our patterns are, this is a chance to wake up to them so we can begin to free ourselves from them. And we're no longer caught up in trying to just run away and indulge in pleasure. We're finding this more equanimous state of being that can allow pleasant and unpleasant experiences to arise. Okay. And yes, and we're opening into the unknown. We don't know what will happen next. Okay. So this fourth meditation myth is that we just really want to escape. Whatever our unpleasant experiences, we're trying to get away. But as I've been saying, really, the opposite is happening when we sit down to meditate. We're actually getting closer to reality, closer to our experience. And so we're learning how to relate to that. Okay, next slide. So I like to say that meditation is really a practice about being with ourselves. So often we are plugged into our computers, our phones, other people, relationships, driving, going here and there. Meditation is where we're unplugging from all of that. And it's just me, myself, and I sitting here on the cushion. And so the question is, how do I relate to myself? What's my attitude towards my experience? And there can be these different kinds of attitudes, and I invite you to be curious about how you relate to yourself at different times, right? We can be receptive, warm, and friendly, like a loving mentor or parent or pet, right? We might be really judgmental of ourselves and critical, demanding, harsh. We might say really mean things to ourselves and push ourselves, right? Or we might be kind of disconnected from ourselves, not sure what we're thinking or feeling, had to push down really painful, traumatic experiences in life. And so we've coped by really being disconnected from our experience in some way. So I invite you to really explore these patterns in yourself. Okay, next slide. So Pema Chodron really talks about the importance of developing this friendliness to ourselves for our practice and for that calmness and happiness that we're really seeking in our lives. She uses this word Maitri. It's a Sanskrit term meaning unconditional friendliness. That's how she translates it. And so learning to really be comfortable, to open to our experience and not judge ourselves and not struggling so much is really important to being more with equanimity in our experience. This is kind of the secret ingredient of practice, I think, that doesn't get talked a lot about in traditional texts, but especially in modern culture, I know in American culture, we can be very judgmental and critical of ourselves. And we can even bring that attitude onto our cushion with our practice. It can be hard to see. It's hidden. And it's often taboo to talk about. So beginning to shine a light on how we judge ourselves and push ourselves is really important in terms of letting it go, to develop a more spacious, accepting way of being with ourselves. And so it's ironically by letting go of trying to improve ourselves in some way that we discover our natural well-being. So in the meditation traditions, it's there's a philosophy where actually we're already, perfect and at ease. It just gets covered over by all of our thoughts, and so we just need to relax and let them dissolve, and then we'll discover our natural well-being. So it's the opposite of a self-improvement approach. Okay. So I'd like to leave just with this final tip of a teaching on how to be with ourselves and our attention. This is a not too tight, not too loose. So like when you tune a guitar, the guitar strings, you don't want it too tight and you don't want it too loose to have that perfect sound, that perfect strum, resonant vibration of the guitar. And so that's how it is with our own attention as we're paying attention to ourselves. We don't want to be too rigid, like a hawk, too focused, and we don't want to be too laid back, too sleepy, dull, or relaxed. So we want to find that sweet spot to have that harmonious strum of our own inner guitar, if you will. Okay, so I think I will leave it at that. I think I've talked for enough.
Great. Well, thank you very much. That was really good. And yeah, I think what resonates with me most is the 2 points that kind of tie together, I think. First one being that people often think that they can't meditate, or they try it and then think, oh, it's not for me because I can't do it. But it's taking that time to get used to thoughts always being there, because they always will, no matter how much you meditate.
Yes.
And then that ties in as well with not being too judgmental of yourself, because I think it can also feel really frustrating if you're sitting there like trying to meditate, and your mind is full of thoughts, and it can almost draw up feelings of anger or frustration. And we get lots of people saying that, lots of people who use Medito. That's a common question, I think, around how to deal with that, or whether it's normal. And it totally is normal. I think probably the most experienced Buddhist monk will probably still have thoughts popping into his mind every now and then,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the question is how we relate. Yeah, how we relate.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. So we've got a few questions. I'll just, because we've been collecting some questions over the past couple of days, so I'll just go through some of the ones we've had, and any that have come in since as well. So firstly, we've got a question from Patrick, who he submitted a question via our Slack community. So he said, "Hi Jennifer, I can understand how meditation could help people with diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. It seems to help lower blood pressure and heart rate, but I'm less clear on how it could help people with prostate cancer. How do you think it helps, and by what mechanism?"
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the context in which I've done this research on prostate cancer, looking at meditation, was in the context of a multi-component intervention that was really focused on eating a really healthy, low-fat, vegan diet for men who had prostate cancer, getting them into healthy exercise programs, social support. And so meditation was one component of that. And the mechanism that I view is really helping to support people in making behavior changes. So the meditation helps regulate our emotions, set our intentions to follow a healthy diet, right? When we want to eat those fatty foods or sweet foods. So practices like meditation can help us work with emotional eating, etc. So it's, I think, more on the behavioral level, in the behavioral support of how meditation is working, and just the psychological stress of being diagnosed with cancer. So this research was done with men who had very low low severity of cancer, and were in a watchful waiting program. And we were seeing if they could delay, more invasive treatment for their conditions.
Okay, interesting. We've also been in talks with, so on our scientific advisory board, there's another member who is looking into doing a study around how meditation and mindfulness can be used with people with kind of like end of life cancer diagnosis as well. So people who are on palliative care, and I guess it could potentially also be a way of helping people kind of come to terms with their state of being, and make their last days more at peace. Yeah. So I guess there's probably many ways that it could potentially help.
Yes, more meaningful. Yes.
Our next question comes from Deb Jane. This one came from Instagram. So the question is, I have started daily meditation this week and I'm finding it helpful in separating my emotionally draining and stressful job from home. However, I keep falling asleep. Do you have any tips on how to stop this happening?
Okay, yeah. So this is very common. I hear this a lot. It's really easy to get sleepy. And there's a couple ways to approach this question. I think one, this could be a sign that you are sleepy. That especially, it sounds like if your job is stressful and you're juggling a lot in life, you're giving your body and mind a chance to settle and just be, and it's taking that moment and it's just relaxing and falling asleep. So this could be a sign that you need more sleep in general. And are there things that you can do to ensure that you can get better quality sleep over the long term? This would be something to explore. So it's kind of a sign. So if it happens, just take that as like your body's telling you something. Also, sleep sometimes can be a way of avoiding emotions that come up. Can be a way to kind of distance ourselves, to kind of escape them. If they're too painful, if we don't want to see them, we might just kind of shut down and fall asleep. That's something else to kind of look into. And the third response is, okay, I'm getting enough sleep. I'm not, avoiding emotions. It's just I get kind of dull and sleepy. Okay. So what do we want to do then? Then we want to think about practicing at a time that's not late at night, that's not right before bed, but a time of the day where we're more naturally alert, that feels comfortable to us. We want to think about the lighting, if we can have some natural light, not too dim, and kind of lifting our gaze can be helpful as well. Not having alcohol before, etc. So just kind of creating the conditions that are going to be supportive to kind of keeping you awake. And you can always get up and move around if you need to, also as well, if you're feeling kind of sleepy, and making sure you're not too warm, take off layers of clothes. So those are some suggestions. You can try those and let us know how it works. Feel free to be in touch.
Great, thank you. I've definitely had a similar experience where I tend to meditate more in the morning rather than the evening, because, if I meditate just before bed, I often start to drift off.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you're laying down too, that can be.
Yeah, exactly. It can also be really useful if you want to go to sleep, because I guess if you lay down in bed, then meditating can help you drift off too.
Yes, it can.
So the next one from somebody called, the user handle was Deep Bonds. So again, this is from Instagram. After guided meditations, I felt ready to do unguided meditation. I was successful once, but thereafter I'm not able to focus on even guided ones. How do you know you are ready for unguided meditations? I have been meditating for over 3 months now, almost daily.
Okay. So great to hear about your practice and having the support of the apps. That's wonderful. And it's a great question to start to wonder about practicing more on your own, like taking off the training wheels, if you will. Like I said, I didn't grow up with a meditation app. So I started kind of practicing in silence. So I think the key here is starting really short, maybe just 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes. Giving yourself that space, that experience, and then, that's enough. And then maybe go to the recording, etc. So just kind of gradually allowing yourself to kind of build up to more and more practice. And it is a different experience. But again, I think noting that, you might get more distracted, and that's okay. You're building a different muscle to bring your attention back, because you're not having the voice of the recording to bring you back. So you're going to have to use a different attentional muscle to do that. And that's going to take a while for you to build. So just really be patient and gentle with yourself, especially in this culture. You know, our brains and our attention are wired differently. We're used to constant distraction and paying attention from this thing to this thing. So to be left on our own, I think it's harder these days. So really be patient with yourself. You might also try a meditation track that, excuse me, that has less talking in it, that gives some space. You could try that.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And yeah, I think it's definitely good to just work your way up to sitting in silence. And I think that's a good goal to have, I think, to not have to rely on guided meditations. But then it's always good to sometimes come back as well to kind of learn about different areas of mindfulness or meditation or different types of meditation. But yeah, I think it's a great thing to be able to eventually do it without a guide. But yeah, but there's no harm in coming back to it either, I think. Okay, so the next question, I think we've kind of already answered this one actually. So the question was, is it okay to lie down during meditation? Everyone always says my spine should be erect, but I find my back aches after some time. So I guess we've already mentioned that you can lie down.
Yeah, yeah, you can lie down, and there's also some tricks to preventing that back pain. I think this is another issue that doesn't get talked a lot about when we're learning meditation from the apps is our posture is really hard to sit, and it's really worth researching this. You really want to have, you don't want to have like your low back hurting, especially if you're sitting cross-legged, just flat. Your low back will start to hurt. So you do want to have your hips higher than your knees. Usually for most of us, everybody is a little different. But if you're using a meditation cushion, make sure that your hips are elevated over your knees, and you want that kind of natural curve in the back. So even though we say a straight spine, your spine still has that lumbar curve. And so you want to really honor that curve. And so if you're sitting on a chair, maybe you want to have like a lumbar cushion behind that to kind of make sure that you're not starting to hunch over. Okay, and then that's compressing the spine and can cause some back pain.
Good tips. Yeah. So I have the same as well. If I'm doing shorter sessions, I tend to sit cross-legged, but if I'm doing it longer ones, I tend to sit in a chair, just to support my back a bit more. Which is another question we get. People ask, is it okay to not have to try to sit in like a traditional meditation posture in the lotus position or half lotus? Or but I think as long as you're practicing being mindful and you're kind of staying in the present moment and following your breath, then it doesn't really matter what posture you're sitting in, right?
Yeah, I think we have to work with our bodies. You know, we didn't grow up sitting on the floor, cross-legged. So that's not going to be helpful for most of us for a long period of time. There are some benefits, I think, to sitting upright. It does, I think, facilitate more alertness. But, if you're really exhausted, if your body is calling you for you to lay down, there's also laying down meditation. This is something that the Buddha taught as well. But you just have to know that it might be a little bit more prone to kind of sleepiness or spaciness. And so maybe you'd want to alternate a little bit.
Okay, cool. So another question here from Paula. She said, I love to meditate while listening to music. Is it actually counterproductive?
This is a really great question. A lot of people ask this, and I think music is supportive for a lot of people, and it can be helpful, right? Because especially if we're not used to silence, some of us, the silence might be really stressful, right? It might seem really weird, especially if we're used to sounds and noises in our life. So I think if you're meditating with music, I think that's okay. Again, it's kind of like the meditation app. At some point, you might want to experiment with a couple minutes of silence, just to give yourself the opportunity to build your attention of focusing in more in a silent context. But again, each person is individual, and you need to do what you feel comfortable with at the same time. So I don't want to, push anyone into a rigid form of how this should be, because we're all so different. So it's important to recognize that. But at the same time, we don't want it just to be like a crutch, right? So unless that's just kind of what you're going for, just some kind of relaxation. But there, but to know, you're not doing it wrong, but you can also experiment with the silence as feels right. I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah. I think, like I said earlier, I think it's great to try to become more comfortable with silence. But at the same time, I think if you meditate listening to music, it can also make the music more enjoyable, right? Because you can notice that I've experienced this, and I noticed things in a music track that I didn't notice before, and that's because you're being more mindful.
Yeah, and I think that's a different practice, right? If you could totally meditate on music, right? You could be like, okay, I'm going to meditate on the sound and notice all the variations and of the music and the vocals and the instruments, etc., and just let that be your focus, right? So otherwise, you're kind of doing two different practices, right? You kind of have the sound going in the background, but then you're paying attention to your breath. So then it's kind of like two practices going on. So our attention is kind of split in two different ways.
Yeah. So you can just use the music as the object of the meditation.
Yeah.
I've had, so I love going to live music and gigs and things. Obviously not recently because of the pandemic, but I've often felt that watching a band play live can be quite meditative, because you're so focused on what's going on in the present moment, like listening to the music and watching what's happening without thinking about other things. So I definitely feel like that can be meditative. We just had another question come in from Mohammed on Facebook. He said, can I meditate 5 to 6 times a day, and is it worth it?
Wow, yeah, that sounds like a retreat almost. A daily practice is good. At least, once a day. That consistency is really good. Twice a day, morning and evening, to bookend your day is really nice stability for the long term. If you have more time in your day to do maybe shorter practices, mini meditations throughout the day, that sounds great. I mean, I think it's up to you to figure out how is this working in my life? Am I able to integrate all my other responsibilities, with life? Is it supporting me, or am I using it to kind of escape in some way, to kind of isolate or avoid certain responsibilities? I don't know. That's kind of for you and everyone to kind of sort out. But certainly, meditation, practicing more often a day can be supportive.
Great,
and you can also notice the benefits too. So you can experiment with yourself. You can track what you notice. That's ultimately what we're doing, right? Where we practice and we're seeing how it impacts us. So you can notice that.
Great. So I think one last one from Lutz. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. He said, what's the best amount of time to meditate? Or is there one? I think that's a good question, because I often hear different people saying, like, if you're not meditating for 20 minutes, then it's not really meditation. But I disagree with that. But yeah, it'd be great to hear what you think.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think there's a couple answers. I think one, it's very individual, so I wouldn't say there's a best for everyone, right? There's going to be maybe a best for you at this time, and that might change, day to day, week to week. But starting out, being gentle with yourself. I think for today's time, 20 minutes is a big ask to start out. I would suggest maybe 5 minutes, like we did. Traditionally, some teachers say you want to actually kind of end your meditation on a good note. You want to have some kind of experience of settling, of noticing your breath, so that you want to come back to it. the next time. We need that positive reinforcement a little bit as we get started. Otherwise, if we're forcing ourselves too long, you don't want to do that. We won't want to come back. So we got to find our sweet spot. So it might be 5 minutes, it might be 10 minutes. The research is suggesting there are benefits even with short meditation practices. I think my students meditate like 10 minutes on average and are finding improvements in anxiety and depression, etc. So 10 to 15 minutes, we can find meaningful improvements.
Okay, great. Another question has just come in. I think we'll make this the last one, from Bat Markley. He said, what is a good meditation for working with physical pain?
Physical pain. Yeah, so this is a really great question and something that comes up a lot. First, we want to make sure that our meditation posture isn't causing us more pain. So being mindful about how you're lying and sitting to be most supportive as possible. And when pain does come, there is the possibility of kind of meditating on the pain. You can explore that, exploring the symphony of sensations, the tingling, the pressure, the heat, the ache, the spiky feeling, whatever it is, really noticing those physical sensations. And then we start to let go of the judgments about the pain that can exasperate the pain experience. Right? So we have the actual physical sensation, and then we have our thoughts and emotional reactions about them that makes it worse. So we're trying to let go of those judgments and those thoughts, the resistance to the pain, and just kind of allowing ourselves to feel into the sensation. And sometimes we can kind of relax and let go, and the body is softening, it's opening, increasing circulation, and that might help reduce the sensation of the pain. So there is some interesting research on looking at meditation for pain and finding some benefits. At the same time, I want to say if if you're in a lot of pain and it, don't, force yourself if this isn't happening. Sometimes we do need like kind of a mindful distraction from our pain at certain times too, if it can be overwhelming. So again, we need to listen to ourselves and kind of find our own way.
Great, thank you very much. So yeah, there were lots of other comments as well, just from people just saying thank you, Lucy, Tyler, Karen. So yeah, thank you all for your nice words. And yeah, and thank you, Jennifer, for taking the time. It's been really great. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Yeah.
And yeah, and thank you everybody for watching. So yeah, just a reminder, Medito Foundation is a non-profit organization completely run by volunteers. So Jennifer's a volunteer on our scientific advisory board. I'm a volunteer, we're all volunteers. So if you'd like to join us, you can go to meditofoundation.org/volunteer. If you'd like to donate, you can go to meditofoundation.org/donate. And yeah, we have a Slack community where anybody can join and kind of give their feedback and join the conversations about the kind of content we're creating, and that kind of thing. So yeah, anybody's free to join us. It would be great to hear if you'd like to see more of this kind of content as well, the live sessions. If you have any ideas about what the kind of thing you'd like us to talk about in the future, then please leave us some more comments and we'll get into that. Great. So yeah, once again, thank you very much, Jennifer. It's been really great. And yeah, hopefully speak to you again soon.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my pleasure, and happy meditating, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.